Good. I'm glad you were able to get through with someone on the live stream. Let's good. I hopefully will get less clumsy at this with more practice. Yeah, good. Let me know quickly when that sort of thing happens. All right, so hackers usually used to argue a lot about these words. I think people have gotten tired of this silly argument. Anyway, originally hackers were just people who were very clever with technology that could make it do something unexpected. And then crackers were the bad guys that broke into things. Anyway, ethical hacker is a common term now for people who are skilled at technology enough to penetrate security barriers, but who don't break the law. Around until maybe 2012 or so, there was a large community of gray hats in the business. People who were white hats by day and black hats by night. They had a job, and at night they would go do illegal things. And on the job, they would frequently do illegal things. And they were accepted because technical knowledge was so rare that companies are willing to put up with craziness and poor social skills and bad morals to get a technical expert. But that's no longer really true. And I think most people have had to clean up because hacking's been around long enough that an awful lot of people have actually grown up and got a job and got a house and got a wife and kids, and suddenly, you know, hacking into somebody's Facebook and risking prison time just doesn't seem worth it anymore once you get up to a higher position of responsibility. And that's kind of going away. So there are people who start out that just run tools without really understanding them. Those are the script kiddies that don't understand what they're doing. There was a lot of that in 2011 and 2012. Anonymous would tell lies to teenagers and get them to install attack tools and help attack Sony. And then they would go to prison and not know what they're doing. They were just being cynically used by adults that lied to them. I mean, they promised them that they won't be able to tell who's attacking them, and then they give you a tool like low orbit ion cannon that just sprays your IP address all through the logs, and then they get locked up. It's pretty cruel, and that's what happens if you do this stuff without even knowing what you're doing. Anyway, once you get past them, the most common kind of penetration tester and security expert does not write tools, they just use tools. The Kali Linux machines we're using contain many attack tools, enough for most jobs. You usually don't have to write a tool. There's a tool out there that will do it. You just have to understand how it works and use it. Just like graphical artists don't write a program, they learn how to use Photoshop and a few other tools. The professional tools are powerful enough. But then it's nice to write your own tools. And if you take the 124 class after this one, we start writing some simple tools in Python. It's good to know a little scripting, but most of the time it's good enough to use the existing tools. And anybody, any kind of computing professional, including security professionals, should really know at least one language. You don't have to be a super expert at one language, but you should be able to write a simple script. If there's something that you have to do 100 times, you should be able to figure out how to write a script to do it 100 times instead of doing it manually 100 times. Like just a bash shell script or a Python script or a Perl script. It doesn't really matter which language you know, as long as you know one of the common languages. Most hackers start with Python. Python is probably your logical choice for your first language because it's very easy to use and it's powerful enough for most purposes. C++ and Java are much more complicated and much faster, and they're probably much more effort than you really want to do on a simple hacking tool. Python or bash scripting is enough for simple hacking tools. Bash is really kind of too limited. Python is usually the sweet spot where it's powerful enough and still easy enough to use. But if you already know a few languages and you have your favorite, that's perfectly fine. They all do exactly the same thing. All languages are mathematically identical. You can do anything in any language. It's just a question of which one is more familiar to you and which one is most appropriate to the task. So you're learning how to do simple activities here. You have to go on before you're ready to be a professional penetration tester or even a defender. Although one thing that does help is if you have people who are defending networks and system administrators and server administrators, it's very good for them to know something about hacking, just so they're more aware of what's happening. Even if their primary focus is not going to be security, being aware of security will make you less likely to be unable to cope with the normal problems that come up. Anyway, so people have a collection of hacking tools. Some people used to make a big deal of accumulating their personal set of tools. These days, pretty much everybody uses Corley. Corley is there. It's been the American standard for pen testing. In Europe, there's other ones that are more popular, but the American standard for years has been Corley, which came from Backtrack, which is all ready to go, and it has almost everything you'd ever want already in there. All the drivers are in there. It's a whole lot easier than setting up your own box. Although it's good to know, and I know Joe McCrae, who teaches on the East Coast, and he has a program called Security Rookies, where he takes apprentices, and he trains them up. He showed me his training program, and it's brutal. It's 4 times as difficult as anything I have. And by week 3, you make your own Linux distribution. There are ways to do that. So that's awesome. We're not going that far in this class. This is a beginning class, but all his stuff is about 3 or 4 classes beyond this class. And he has like a 12 or 16 week program. And if you stick with it, at the end, he arranges for you to have real jobs. He puts you real pen test jobs. So you really get up to professional levels, but you start by knowing everything you can learn at this college pretty much, and then moving forward. Anyway, so a white box model is one common security test where they actually give you information about the network. They give you a name and password to get in. They give you the network diagram, maybe the organization flow chart, and then you do your test. This is one way to do it. So they'll give you a network map like this that shows the servers and the IP addresses and what versions of things are being used. And they might give you all that information to start out with. The more common is the black box model, where you hack in the way criminals do from the outside with no prior knowledge. And the experienced testers spend a lot of effort doing reconnaissance, investigating the company, investigating the people, scanning everything to find out what they've got. Then you can mix the two where you give them partial information. Another issue is whether they tell the actual administrators that the penetration tester is attempting to come in. Usually they promise not to, and then secretly tell them anyway. So there's one guy I know that the casinos in Vegas have to have pen tests. And there was a guy that was a professional pen tester came to give a talk here, and he said he was giving might have been a blog I read. I mean, he was hired to do a pen test of a casino in Vegas. So they said, come on June 13, and we won't tell anybody you're coming. So he said, I know how this works. So he showed up a week early, totally got in. Nobody was ready for him. Got pictures of him posing with the system administrator in the server room. Got, pictures of him having root on the main server, root on the company CEO. He totally got in. Then the day came when we were supposed to have the pen test start, and he walked in and said, okay, I'm done. Wham, here's my pen test. And they freaked out and fired him because they didn't want a real pen test. They wanted him to fail and say they were secure. And they didn't understand the score because real professional pen testers have a success rate of 100%. They always get in. They always get domain admin. If your pen tester does not get in, then you hired the wrong pen tester, because nobody can be safe. Not Google, not the NSA, not anybody. There are so many computers in any company that somewhere there is a clown that didn't put on the update, brought in their home machine, connected something the wrong way to the internet, bought a cheap router and added it to their office. So there's another, there's a way in, and you should be able to find it. But you learn something about your security posture from how they got in, and they give you recommendations to improve the company, but you're never perfectly secure. Anyway. There's a lot of credentials you can get. Security Plus and Network Plus are where you should start. That's certainly what you do at this department and most colleges. That's a good place to start. CCNA is good, although that's much more deeply into networking than most pen testers go. It's not directly related to security, but it's very good to understand how networks work. So we got classes for that and their certifications. Those certifications will not typically get you a job, but they will show that you're serious, and they might get you like an apprenticeship. And if you get a more advanced certification, then you might get a job from it. Certified Ethical Hacker is another one beyond Security Plus. This one has a pretty bad reputation. When I did it, there was no Linux in it at all. It was all Windows, which is kind of ridiculous. And almost all the materials at that time were stolen. They would just copy and paste from other people's stuff. Now it's a couple versions past, and it's getting more professional. The main reason why people continue to do this is these guys have a very close relationship with the US military. The military really likes this cert, and the company really ties themselves closely to the military. So they respect this cert. Real pen testers in industry laugh at this cert. This does not make you a pen tester. What it does do, though, and mostly how they market it, is it makes someone who is not primarily a security person much more aware of security. So your network or server administrator that has a CEH will probably be much more prepared to secure that server. But a real pen tester gets this one, OSCP. This one is greatly respected in the industry. I've got 5 or 6 students studying for it now. It's beyond all the classes here, but if you take 123 and 124, that covers most of the topic, and you then just need to practice and get good at it. And this one is greatly respected because, like a Cisco certificate, this is not a multiple choice test. You connect to their network on VPNs, and they give you 36 hours to hack into 6 boxes, and you have to get in and take them over. And then you have to prepare a report and explain what you got in and what you found, just like a real pen test. So it's not answering questions you memorized. It's doing it for real. And that's the kind of search that people respect, because that means you can really do it. Red Hat Linux Enterprise certification is similar. They stick you in a room, you have a computer, you have no internet, no manuals, it won't even boot up, it crashes. You don't even have the password. They say, okay, you have 8 hours. By the end of 8 hours, this thing has to be a web server, email server, FTP server, and updated to the latest version, go at it. And you know, after that, they can seriously put you in the server room and you're not going to be an idiot. You know how to do it. Those credentials are more valuable than the ones that just mean you answer a lot of questions on a test. Anyway, so none of my students have this one yet, and I don't have it, but hopefully by the end of this semester, some of us will have it, because they're studying, and quite a few of them are going to try to finish it in the next 30 days. And if you go to the Saturday class, the hacking club, they're talking about it and forming study groups for it and such. CISSP is the most important certification to get. This is the one everybody has to have. It's the Union Card of Security Professionals. I know a guy that has 25 certificates, and this is the only thing on his business card, CISSP. It's that important. It's the only one I maintain. The others I earned, and I let them lapse by not bothering to keep paying the fees or anything, but I maintain my CISSP. I pay the fee, and I submit continuing education to keep it. This is not a technical cert. It's not a hands-on cert. It's a management cert. So you learn the concepts and what they mean, and you don't actually do any hands-on work at all for this cert. But it comes with a ethical guideline, and you can lose it by having complaints about your ethics. And the point of this is you will understand what the management perspective on security is, and you will understand how to cooperate with management. And this proves that people can trust you and you can work with management, and that you have enough technical competence to understand the terms and what the pen testers are doing. And that turns out to be super important, because the cliche of this business is your technical experts are just crazy drunken hackers swearing and coming in at midnight and putting porn and MP3s on the network and just doing all sorts of crazy things. And management doesn't even know what they're doing. And management can't even communicate with them. They're always mad about something, screaming and yelling that something's wrong with the network. But when you talk to them, you can't even understand what they want. When you try to do it, they just say you did it all wrong. They have no respect for the boss. This is the cliche of this business. That these crazy, angry, drunken hackers, not really in control of management, and yet super important. And they do frequently freak out and dump all the data on paste bin and say management didn't respect me and stuff. So they would much rather get people with a CISSP who have learned how to talk to the boss, what the management's talking about, hopefully respect the boss. Remember that the boss owns the network. You know, in San Francisco, our network administrator, Terry Childs, was a classic hacker type. You were supposed to be a team of 3 administrators. He told the other 2, you guys are a bunch of incompetent fools. I'm locking you out. I'm changing the passwords. I'm going to do it myself. None of you are good enough to have access to my network. And they were so afraid of him, they did that. Then he changed everything without permission, and he refused to give the password to his own boss. He said, my boss is just an idiot. He'll tell the password to someone. He locked everything down to where nobody else could get in. And then they arrested him and prosecuted him. And he was the first person successfully prosecuted for hacking his own company network, because he exceeded his authority even as the system administrator. And finally, the mayor of San Francisco had to visit him in his prison cell twice to get the password to unlock the network. Everyone was locked out of the San Francisco network. This is very common, that the technical expert thinks that all that matters is my technical expertise, and that makes me better than everybody. And he doesn't remember that you might be the technical expert, but you don't own the network. It's the company network, and it's management that owns the network. This is sort of like the US military. I mean, they can go blow something up, but the fact is the civilian president is the boss. And even though you can go do anything you want, in fact, you don't own all those guns and tanks and everything. Really, the president does. And you might not like it, but you can't just go use those things until you get approval from above. Anyway, and that's the point of this certificate. And you can get the training for it here. You won't get a CISSP unless you have 5 years of industry experience, but you can get Associate of ISC squared by passing the test while you accumulate the experience. Anyway, SANS has a bunch of certifications and classes. They are very good. The problem with them is they cost too much money. They all cost like $3,000 or $6,000. They have them at the big conventions like RSA. So a lot of people go to these things, but you don't go to them until you have a job and your boss is paying for it. This is where people spend their training budget. So get a job and your boss should give you so many $1,000s a year of training. This is a good place to spend it. And then you get certifications to go with it. Anyway, there's a limit on what you can do legally. The laws in security are very confusing. It turns out that if you have permission from the company to do a test on the company, that's legal. But a lot of other things are not legal, even fairly innocent things. I went on the internet and did a Google search and found the University of Louisiana had left 2,000 patient records just available on the internet where anybody could see them. And when I notified them, my lawyer told me, you technically broke the law doing that. And I'm like, dude, if you Google something and click on the link, you've now broken the law. However, it's not something that you could go to jail for unless you're a lunatic, as long as you're willing to get a lawyer and play along with your lawyer, but technically you broke the CFAA. The Computer Fraud and Abuse Act, like most acts, most laws, the legal community cannot figure out what a crime is. It's actually very difficult. I mean, suppose I say it's illegal for someone to connect to your computer over the network and run software without telling you. That's Windows Update. Windows Update does that all the time. Java Update does that all the time. So why is that legal? And it's not legal when a virus comes in and does the same thing. Exactly what's the difference? And so what they settled on is authorization. If you connect to a computer and you gain information from it that you're not authorized to have, you have now broken the Computer Fraud and Abuse Act. And the idea is they're thinking about you connecting to it and stealing credit card numbers or something. But it means if I load a web page and look at the source code and find a security vulnerability, I've now broken the law because I gained information I'm not authorized to have. I know there's security vulnerability. And that's the sense in which the law is confusing. Anyway, that's why in this business, you have to have legal consultation as you move ahead. Although if you're working in a corporate role within your own company, then none of this will typically apply. Although as Terry Childs demonstrates, it is possible to be authorized in your company and still do something so outrageous that you end up being prosecuted for it. And the thing that scared a lot of people is Volkswagen. They prosecuted the people that wrote the Volkswagen software to cheat on the emissions tests. So they were programmers and they were writing the code their boss told them to write to put in their product, and they got prosecuted for that. This is like concerning a lot of people. It's kind of like the Nuremberg trials where military people were doing what they were told to do by their appropriate higher authority and yet still prosecuted for it. It's kind of rough. Anyway, but unless you're doing something crazy, these issues should not come up. There's always some people that want to outlaw the possession of hacking tools. They've tried this in Germany. They've tried it in France. It hasn't gone too far in America. And they tried, in some states don't like you to have lockpicks. A lot of people would like you not to have Kali Linux, but there is no law against it in America. The point is, owning tools, certainly in California, and as far as I know, hacking tools in the entire nation is not a crime in itself. It's just if you use them to do a crime. But in other countries, they have tried outlawing hacking tools, which is something that makes the security community very angry because then you can't have a training class and you can't learn how to defend networks. But this is their sort of cyber version of gun control. It hasn't happened very much in America any more than the other kind of gun control has happened very much in America. Anyway, port scanning, for example, is a very common activity. You can take Nmap or any other scanning tool, although the most popular one is, of course, Nmap, and scan a server to see what's open. And that, you could argue, might break the law, but no one has ever been successfully prosecuted for it. That is considered fair use by most people. It's the equivalent of going up to an apartment building and ringing every bell to see who's home. If you proceed beyond that to take over the server, then you've broken the law, but the general consensus is that nobody can go to jail for just doing an Nmap scan. And by the way, if you park your car outside somebody's unencrypted wireless network and connect and use their internet, no one's ever been successfully prosecuted for that either. Various people think these might be technically illegal, but in both cases, these have not been seen as significantly important enough for anybody to really go to jail for them. Every network has a acceptable use policy. City College does too. Most of them say the obvious things: you cannot use our network to perform a crime, you cannot put malware on the network, you can't put unauthorized copies of copyrighted things on our network, and so on. the usual stuff, but they have to write that someplace so that they can then kick you off the network if you do those things. There are federal laws out there. The Computer Hacking and Intellectual Property Law tries to protect proprietary company information, like your engineering drawings of your new product. Like Apple has a ton of this. There's always a super secret what's going to be in the new iPhone, and they don't want anybody knowing. And if someone was to hack into Apple and steal that, they would want to prosecute them. And this would be a law they could use to do that. Say, you stole our confidential intellectual property. The Computer Fraud and Abuse Act is the main one used to prosecute hackers. This is the one that makes it a crime to connect to a server and get something you're not authorized to have. And most hacking falls, it has to do with stealing information, is prosecuted under that law. ECPA is another one. The Patriot Act is out there too. And the Stored Wire and Communications Act is another one that can be used. Another one that's important is the Digital Millennium Copyright Act, which specified digital signatures and made it possible to do financial transactions over the internet. It makes it a crime to overcome a copy barrier. And at that time, for example, there was CSS, the content scrambling system, was used to encode commercial movies so that you could not copy them without permission. But it used only a 40-bit key, and 2 to the 40 is a small number, so it was easy enough to write a simple C program that would try all possible keys and decrypt the movies. And possession of, and that information was technically illegal by the Digital Millennium Copyright Act, so there was quite a stir in the community as people found ways to encrypt that information and stick it on a t-shirt. Now suddenly possession of this t-shirt and seeing this t-shirt is now a crime. This is what happens frequently. People try to make mathematics illegal. It's basically trying to make it illegal to be smart, and it's kind of a losing proposition. But it is one of the ridiculous positions that you end up in the law. Another one that got a lot of people incensed was WikiLeaks. WikiLeaks started dumping top secret stuff from Edward Snowden, which then ended up in the New York Times, and the military leaders told their military members, you are not allowed to read the New York Times anymore, because the New York Times contains classified data that you are not authorized to see. And even though you could say this is ridiculous, the whole world could see it, the fact is you have an oath, you have an honor code that you're not going to read that stuff, and you're breaking it if you read the newspaper. And I remember, like everyone else, I laughed at that at first, and then when I thought about it more, and sort of, it kind of made sense to me. But you often get backed into sort of ridiculous corners by security issues. Anyway. So installing viruses and worms is a crime. Doing denial of service attacks that freeze servers so people can't use them is a crime. So if you do these things by accident during a pen test, then you hopefully have a clause in your contract. That's why you get a contract before you perform a pen test, because if someone remodels your kitchen or puts a roof on your house, they also get a contract because there is a possibility that they will damage things in your house or cause problems, and they want to make clear to what extent they're going to pay for that. And the same thing's true of a computer pen test. You say, I'm going to try and be careful, but we might bring servers down, cause interruptions in service. We did it at the college. I taught this class in the summer a few years ago, and a professional pen tester wanted to take the class. And I said, that'll be great. So he brought along his stuff, and I said, let's do a scan of the college. And I asked and got permission, and I didn't know it, but his scanner really made a lot of traffic, and it froze up some college servers and caused things to quit working. And I was really glad I had permission. But anyway, it can happen. Your tools are more dangerous than you think they are. Anyway, so getting a contract in writing is best business. Then if there's some argument about whether you did the right thing, there's a clear statement of what should happen. There are sample contracts out there you can copy, just like there are for other businesses where there's some risk involved, which is pretty much everything. If a contractor's fixing your house and they fall down and break their leg, then it should be in the contract who's going to pay for that and how much is it going to hurt you that there's now a delay or something. All right. Anyway, so to be a security tester, you got to know a lot about technology, and you have to have the ability to communicate with management. Typically, pen testing teams have two kinds of people. They have some management type people that can look good in a suit and make a beautiful PDF and appear before the management and explain it to them. And they have these scruffy pen testers staying up all night with t-shirts doing the hacking stuff, and the guy in the middle translates that stuff into a beautiful looking business document that management can understand, and you have to do that. it's typically not just one person. People tend to specialize in one role or the other. And typically, when you're young, you do the technical stuff and you fly from state to state, you travel all the time and you learn all this stuff. And as you get older and you get a house and a family and stuff, you get tired of all that traveling and you move up into management where there's more money and less travel. But there are exceptions, of course, to every rule. So let me show you a couple projects. That's it for covering the chapter. And I'm going to stop and restart the Zoom meeting so that the people can see this demo. Let me stop share, stop meeting.